run a group of funds that identifies, acquires, rehabilitates, and preserves commercial historic buildings throughout the country. I think we're in 25 states now. We've done nearly 200 projects across the United States. And they're very, very gratifying when you save a historic building and bring it back to life.
Hey, teammates, welcome to another episode of It's All About the Team, and I'm so excited today to introduce you to Drew Sparacia. Drew, welcome.
We are not run like a family business. Anybody who's even remotely related to you works harder than anybody else. And I said, well, we hold them to a higher standard.
If you're going to be in charge of building that team, you have to know the business. You have to know the numbers.
She just looked at me and said, are we going to be okay? I said, I think so.
Right.
And she said that I'm fine.
Don't critique the performer, critique the performance.
Good morning.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Well, as we were talking before this started, I don't know the first thing about your world, which one thing I've learned having this is about our 48th or 49th episode is when you meet someone from a world that's not your own, you learn so much and you realize that teams are teams and, there's a lot of foundational things. And so I always like to try to figure out how you built your philosophy of what being a good teammate is first. And then when you get the blessing to try to be a team builder, the lessons you've learned along the way. So you came to us in Ohio from Long Island, New York.
That is correct.
And so what brought you to Ohio?
I was a very, very much a math science student growing up. My dad was a math teacher, amongst other things. And I was a little bit of a mama's boy, quite frankly. And I wanted to get away. My family, nobody left Long Island for generations. And I wanted to get away. I needed a liberal arts rounding out for my education. I did the tour of all the liberal arts schools in Ohio and settled on Ohio Wesleyan, which is just north of Columbus.
Sure.
And met a girl there. And that girl was from Chardon, Ohio.
Okay.
And,
Hilltoppers.
Yes,
yeah.
Absolutely. And we'll be married 35 years in a couple months here.
Wow.
So
Wonderful. Good for Ohio.
Yeah.
I always tell people, because I'm really into this education workforce side of things, and Ohio right now has an opportunity with so many things coming our way that if we can get the right workforce, I kind of say that it's a little bit like we got a great schedule. We got Notre Dame on the schedule, we got the New York Giants, we've got we got a great schedule. Now we got to make sure we got the players, to play that schedule, and one of the things that we have to do is do a great job of keeping our great people in Ohio, our talented folks. And we've got to attract people, and our universities can do that, and business and so forth can do that. And then we've got to keep them because you never have enough talent. And what high school in Long Island?
Oh, Sachem High School.
Sachem, okay. I used to coach at Syracuse, and we had, 2 or 3 great Long Island players, and they were tough. Are you tough?
A lot of tough kids.
I tell you what, tough.
I had to be tough. I
had to be.
2 younger brothers who were much tougher than I am, and I played loosely football growing up. My dad was a high school football coach for a while.
Wow.
And that beats it into you. But the culture on Long Island is a pretty tough culture. Yeah. I mean,
all of our Long Island guys were lacrosse players.
Lots of lacrosse players. That was one of the reasons I picked Ohio Wesleyan. Is about half the students they were from the East Coast, because back then lacrosse was primarily at the high school level an East Coast sport.
Right. So I went to Baldwin Wallace, which Ohio Wesleyan, Baldwin Wallace, John Carroll. We're all in the same world, and it makes me feel old every time someone brings up Ohio Wesleyan, because the head football coach there now is a young guy named Tom Watts.
Okay.
And Tom's been there probably 15 years, and he's the great-grandson of my dad's coach at Baldwin Wallace. And I'm thinking, great-grandson, and he's now the coach. That means I must be pretty old.
You're getting up there in age when you need to do math to know what generation people are in compared to you.
Right. So, well, we just had the 222nd birthday of Ohio.
Yes.
Back in March, and I've been there for over a third of the birthdays. So when I did that math, I thought, man, I'm getting up there. But so it's interesting that you felt with your strengths in math and science,
Mm-hmm.
you wanted to go and make sure you rounded out,
Yep.
your skill set. Anything in particular about the liberal arts education that you think helped get you ready to be a good teammate and or build teams?
Yeah, it's interesting. I hadn't thought about that question before, and you say that people who focus on liberal arts as opposed to people who focus on the pure math and science, as I affectionately refer to them as the geeks, they're completely different types of people, personality-wise. Their core, very similar, good people, but the way they express themselves, the way they interact, the way they communicate, very, very different from those two general groups. And that helped me a lot and continues to help me to this day. And I look back, and that was probably the real beginning to how I go about, managing people and interacting with people today.
I've always believed that a university, and I'm sure this is an incorrect definition of university, but it's mine, is unity in diversity. And when you go to a university, you leave your hometown, you leave your culture, you leave what you've grown to think, believe, prefer, whatever, and you go to a place where there's people from all over the place.
Yep.
And your roommate might be someone that you never knew someone with that background. Your buddies might end up being that. And that's the way you grow, is gaining that respect, gaining that awareness, like, oh, there are other things to think about other than what I think. Mm-hmm. And, it's I'm a real believer in the small school education because I did it. I wouldn't change it for the world. I ended up spending a lot of time in big places, and I believe in those because, there's the same unity and diversity. And probably the biggest change from being a student to now looking at universities, there's an international unity and diversity that we didn't have. We didn't have international students. And I always thought that was so valuable when I was a president, just to see our students sitting in the classroom or in the laboratory with someone from another country. They probably couldn't find the country on the map.
No, that a lot of truth to that. And you say that. I had one interaction early on when I first came to Ohio with a young lady who was from Cincinnati, and we literally couldn't understand each other for a couple of weeks because our language, our slang, our accents were completely different. It took a while to just be able to communicate normally. Obviously we could understand each other, but to just have that natural flow of conversation took a little while.
So why did you choose accounting?
Had that math background. Accounting just made sense to me. Mm-hmm. I enjoyed the learning in and around accounting. I spent a lot of time with the mathematics program as well. It just made sense, and I enjoyed it, and enjoyed the professors and the other students in there.
I talk to my students all the time when I was a president, and even when I was a coach, about, I don't know if you understand what accounting can be as a foundational, because, in fact, I know you worked with Lori Burles, right?
Well, very, we overlapped a very little bit. Yeah.
And one of the things I gleaned from her interaction on our podcast was, I forget what the question was, but her feeling was, if you're going to be in charge of building that team, you have to know the business. You have to know the numbers. You have to know the measurables, and that accounting background. And it worried me a little bit. Our accounting department at Youngstown State was great. The kids we turned out were fabulous. I was worried there weren't enough of them.
That's still true today.
And I would have accounting firms come into my office and say, hey, we love your students. Could we just be the preferred accounting firm for your student? I said, well, no, I can't do that. I mean, they're going to go where the market takes them. And one of the things that I tried to instill in the kids when they were thinking about which way to go was, sometimes you do have to choose the hard thing.
Oh, no question.
Because the hard thing is really going to get you ready. And I used to get in arguments all the time with these kids because I was in sports. Well, I want to be in sport management. And I said, well, that means you're not going to have to take, you're going to have to take business courses, but you're not going to have to take the real tough ones. And there's something to that, taking the hard route.
Well, I think it also changes your mental perspective on life is when you're used to doing the hard things, so much more appears easy.
Yeah.
And when you're used to doing the easy things, a lot of the easy things seem hard. So
Right.
I think that perspective is important.
And the hard
for
things
people
seem
to-
impossible.
Yes. Well, yeah, that's a good point. That's,
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So when you left there,
Mhm.
where did you go first?
I started at Ernst & Young, an accounting firm.
Okay.
Oh, actually, before that, I left Ohio Wesleyan. I came up here to Case Western and got my law degree and MBA.
Okay.
Loved that, and the reason I went there is I was accounting, but I really liked the tax component of accounting. And at the time, the big accounting firms weren't hiring you right in the tax. You had to go into audit, and I'm like, I really like tax. So I was counseled to go into law school and business school, and I came up to Case and had a wonderful 4 years there getting those degrees.
One of my good buddies from college at Baldwin Wallace ended up being one of the partners there. Lee Thomas, did you?
Oh yeah, I know Lee well. Yeah,
Yeah.
Lee's a good guy.
Yeah.
Very good guy. I did a bunch of work for him
Yeah.
while I was up there.
Well, we called him Lee Trevino. His name was Lee Thomas, but back when we were in school, Lee Trevino was the hot golfer.
Sure.
So we always call him, to this day, I call him Trevino. He's the chairman of our board
Oh, I
at
didn't
Baldwin
realize
Wallace.
that. I didn't.
He's retired from EY, and he's the chairman of the board. And like most board members I've worked with, they say, man, this was harder than my regular job. If you're going to be on a board, especially in a challenging world like small college, liberal arts, higher education at all levels is a challenge right now. And, the national conversation isn't friendly to higher ed right now. Like, oh, don't go get that debt. Or, oh, you can go, with a lot less sitting in a chair, you can go make a lot more money doing this or that. And I always say, hey, look, we need everybody. We need the accountants, we need the lawyers, we need the doctors, and we need the robotics folks. We need the 3D printing, additive manufacturing, the technical group, and that's what's been interesting to make sure that the conversation doesn't get one way or the other. Like, no, we don't need everyone going to college, but we need lots of good people going to college, and we need lots of people going this direction. And but it's so Lee's got his hands full as the president of a small college board, but he's sharp.
And I don't envy the folks in charge of higher education, right? Well, education period, because it's changing so rapidly with the technology.
Right.
Ways to learn and what you have to learn. It's all changing and rapidly. So I don't envy them at the moment.
Faster than ever. When the computer came into vogue, we had stacks of cards and stuff back in. We had one computer, I think, on campus in the 70s. Well, then all of a sudden it started evolving, and that changed things quickly. But now I think the pace of change, and with the pace of change like that, how does that change how you build teams?
Oh, keeping the teams up to speed, and even though our methods of communication are so tight, because the pace of change is so quick, it gets harder and harder to communicate. Even though the tools are trying to keep up,
Right.
People can only function so quickly. So it makes it, quite frankly, a little bit more difficult to communicate and keep everybody on the same page because we're getting bombarded by information from so many different channels.
And we're getting encouraged, probably rightfully so, that we better stay ahead of the curve because the curve will blow right by us, and so that's added. So think back to your EY days. Can you think of one person that, as you were a young person in the company, that gave you any lessons of being a good teammate?
Yeah, there's a gentleman who was very difficult to work for, by the way, but was a great guy, and he's still around. His name was Ben Cohen. He was a tough guy to work for. He had very high expectations of everybody, and coming from New York, big Italian family, I had fairly thick skin, so I could work for him, and it didn't affect me too much. But he he was incredibly smart, and he taught me so much over the almost 5 years I was with Ernst and Young. Uh, but you had to be able to have that thick skin and listen. He had a big influence on me. My personality and how I interact with people is completely different today than it was back then, and I think he's somewhat responsible for that. He just had high expectations of everybody.
Isn't that the way, if you think back to your teachers, the best one was the one that had the highest expectations for you?
Mm-hmm.
You think back to your coaches, they were the ones that held you to an accountability level. And I'm sure the same thing as you go through. The coaches I worked for as an assistant coach, I mean, I think about the lessons I learned from them, that so much of it was that expectation of how good we wanted to be. And if you want to be good, it's going to be high expectations to be that.
No question. And, during my time at EY, I did a lot of work for Ben. I did a lot of work for a guy named Rich Greco as well, who had equally high expectations, but the way he communicated that was completely different than Ben. Yeah. And having both of them, working for both of them, really taught me, wow, there's a lot of different ways to go about getting to the same goal.
And I think you glean things from each person that you're blessed to work with.
Oh, no question.
And I used to always tell my coaches, don't go out and try to emulate someone if you become a head coach. You got to go out and be you. Now, take the things that you think were very valuable from all the people you worked with. But, people know when you're not being you and you're trying to be someone else.
And that's hard because, especially with all the management books, all the videos now on how to manage and build teams and whatnot, you look at one and you go, that's great. I want to do it just like them. And then you realize over time you can't be authentic and do that. You have to take bits and pieces of all the different great people that are out there that really surrounds your personality and how you work to be best for you and how you can get it done. So that is something I think younger people have a hard time with. They think there's a right way to do things, and there's really never a right way. There are many right ways. With a lot of themes that work through it. So.
Well, and it was amazing as I think back to the coaches I worked for. They were all so different, but they all had things that I know I went and did, those little things. And so you moved from EY to Steris?
Then I went to Steris.
Okay.
And they were a client of mine when I was at Ernst & Young, very small startup almost. Client. So when you talk about understanding the business, I was there before they really had any sales. And then they started to grow. They became public, and I was asked to come on board to run their tax and eventually part of their finance departments. And amazing experience there for 6 years. Worked for some phenomenal people there. A guy named Mike Karasman. Another hard charger, another guy with very high expectations, but learned a tremendous amount from him on how to go about doing things.
So one of my neighbors, we have a place in Florida, and one of my neighbors is a guy named Mike Tokich.
Yeah,
Mike?
I know Mike briefly from Steris, but he is very good friends with one of my partners at GBX, and one of my partners is Antonin Robert, who said he met you because he's been down to Mike's house in Florida, so he's had a drink or two with you.
Yeah. No, he's a good guy and hard charger. Mm-hmm. You could tell high expectations, and that's. I think back to my assistant coaches who were really effective. There were foundational things about them that were very much like the head coaches I worked for. They had some of those things that they genuinely cared for the people, that they worked with. Mm-hmm. All the while, though, they were going to evaluate them. Mm-hmm. That we used to always use the phrase, "Don't critique the performer, critique the performance."
Absolutely.
Make sure the performer knows you love them, and and then you have a chance to make that connection. And everyone does that a different way. Mm-hmm. Some people can make it look like they genuinely care about you, but it's in different way than the other person
Yeah,
does.
no question.
You know,
And people know when you really care and when you don't.
don't, yeah,
I
and
mean,
that's the
they
truth.
they truly know.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a feeling, and it's pretty clear, I think, most of the time.
So what
So
made you think that, you know what, I'm going to go off away from the corporate and I'm going to go out and do the hard thing of trying to go on my own?
yeah, and it was hard because I had a great career that was continuing to build at Steris. They let me do pretty much whatever I wanted to do as long as it was adding value to the organization. I was working 50, 60 hours a week, loving it. Could have worked 70 or 80,
Mm-hmm.
just really enjoyed it. But I had a wife and kids at home, and I wanted to be a bigger part of the family on a daily and week basis. I wanted to coach some of their sports. I wanted to be there for them. So I figured I'd step away from corporate America and do some consulting, and I could do it on my time. And sat down with my wife, and again, had a pretty good salary, good career, and she just looked at me and said, "Are we going to be okay?" I said, "I think so,"
Right.
and she said that I'm fine. And so that was the beginning of what in January will be 25 years ago, starting GBX Group.
You decided to venture out on your own.
Yep.
GBX, could you tell our viewers and listeners what GBX is and really what gave you the courage to go out and build your own team? It's one thing to be a good teammate because you know you got the comfort of the team, or to be leading a team because you have the comfort of the organization. What gave you the courage to go out and build your own team, and tell us what GBX does?
Yeah, I guess to answer the courage part, I was surrounded by a lot of great people who gave me a lot of advice before doing that, had promised to be there if I needed the help. My dad financially, I said, "Hey, if I need a safety net, I get in a little trouble. Can you help?" He said, "Absolutely." Never needed it, thank goodness. Um, but with that network of people and close friends and advisors, that's what really gave me the courage. I'd love to sit here and tell you, I knew I could do it. It was all about me, but
Oh.
it wasn't. It wasn't.
And you were
Just to get
scared.
there. Oh, totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
It's not bad to be scared.
Yep. Nope. And had enough early success to keep it going, just enough, because it was a number of years before I would say I was anywhere near back to making the amount of money I was making when I left Stars. But I had the quality of life. I was happy. The family was happy. So I don't regret one day.
So when you went and started it, I know when I went and first became a head coach, thank goodness I had an athletic director who was an old school guy, and he said, "Now listen, slow down on choosing your staff because your staff, when you do this for the first time, is going to be so critical, and you don't want to make mistakes." And so, how did you decide who was going to be a part of your staff team?
That is something that I have some great conversations with other business owners and people about, because there's this belief in society that, and I'll use the word broadly, that nepotism is bad. Okay, and nepotism people generally put in the category of just family members. I broaden it up to people really, really well and trust. And whenever I look to add somebody to my team, I'm looking for somebody that I know well, I trust, and I know they're going to fit in the culture. And it's how I started it. That's how we are today. When you look through GBX, 2/3 of the people have a story of, 1 degree to Drew.
Yep.
The other third we hired because we had a need, and nobody internally, myself or anybody else, knew anybody that they knew would fit the culture. And what's interesting is when they come in, they start to bring some of their relationships to the organization. So that comfort level with the people, trust, belief in their hard work, we would much, much rather have it come from somebody we know than somebody we don't. That doesn't always work, but that's the strong bias, and it's worked for us so far.
Well, it's interesting you say that the nepotism thing is, not looked, because I think back to the guys I had coached for me over the years, and 90% of them I had worked with at some point in time, and I knew that they valued kids because that's what we were about. I knew that they valued more than just winning. No, but they also knew we had to win.
Yeah.
You know,
No,
I mean,
yeah, no
that was
question.
important. But um, and it probably, if I could think about maybe making a mistake or two over the course of decades, it was probably when I didn't know enough about the person, but they seemed to have a resume that would suggest that they have the expertise that I need, and that's so. I'm a pro nepotism guy. I have to go on record.
Yeah, well, and look, coaching and sports, I think, is a little different than general business in this regard. Um, it's much more like a family than it is a corporate environment. And early on, as we started building GBX, our focus was we want to run the organization more like a family than a big corporation. And I think that's where I think we have more similarities in the way we run our culture with coaching in professional sports or down to youth league. I coached youth football for a dozen years. So it's always been that family environment. And there, the resume only tells you so much if
Right.
they're going to fit inside that family culture. And that's why we like to look to the people who we know fit already and say, who do you know? Because
Yeah.
they don't want to bring somebody in
absolutely.
who's not going to fit.
Right.
So we rely very heavily on that.
In fact, I think back to any hires I made that I hadn't worked with them. I hadn't seen them, see how they treat people and see how they interact and just how hard they work. I did always have someone who I trusted without question when they told me that this is the kind of person you're looking for, because that's that's so critical. And so now your boys work for you as well.
And my three boys, they all work for us. One thing I was sure of that I really wanted to be clear on with people early on that is family members coming, because I have other family members, extended family members that work at GBX as well, is we are not run like a family business. And we hired a gentleman, runs our legal real estate group about a year ago. And at the end of last year, I sat down with him to do his end of the year review. And one of the comments he made was that, Drew, I want to tell you, I've worked for a lot of family businesses before. This place is nothing like that. You're anybody who's even remotely related to you works harder than anybody else. And I said, well, we hold them to a higher standard. And he says it's great to see because in a lot of family businesses, you see the kids or the grandkids have some level of entitlement. Not all businesses, but and he says that's not here, and that's important to me.
Well, and that you have to work at that.
Yes.
I know I played for my dad, and he made it clear before, and my oldest brother played for him, and he made it clear to both of us that, like, hey, if it's even, the other guy's probably going to play.
Yes, no question.
Yep. Just so you know, I mean, you are going to clearly have to be. Everyone in the building is going to have to know that you should be in that position, or, but you knew it going in, and it kind of gave you that extra desire to be, as good as you could be, and so tell our viewers and listeners what GBX does.
Yeah, and in a nutshell, we could talk hours about this, but I'm not going to. We run a group of funds that identifies, acquires, rehabilitates, and preserves commercial historic buildings throughout the country, generally in urban centers. I think we're in 25 states now. We've done nearly 200 projects across the United States. And they're very, very gratifying when you save a historic building and bring it back to life. You have a lot of accolades that come in, but for me, it's that warmth of seeing the community feel good about a project. So that's really, in essence, what we do. Now, to do that, we work with more than 40 federal, state, and local programs around the country that aren't always designed to work together. And so we have a lot of really smart people at GBX that figure out how to make those programs work together to achieve the goal of bringing those buildings back to life.
So is it critical that you identify the places you go, that those have to be good teams?
Yeah, and I think when I look at team, part of the challenge at GBX is we're building not only a team internally, we have teams of teams, because so much of what we do is intertwined with federal, state, and local entities of some sort, a lot of nonprofit groups, and they're completely different types of teams than our team is, but they have to play well together. So the answer there is a little bit more complicated than just how does your team function.
Well, and don't some of the federal and state and so forth teams change throughout the
all the
course of your project?
No question.
And so, have you done some in Ohio?
Oh, yes.
Okay,
yes.
so give us one that you're proud of, and what you felt that team that you're going to brought.
Well, I'll give you one that I want to be proud of. I'm not proud of yet because it's not done. Is we have a building down in Columbus. It's called the Solutions Building. It's right downtown where the new hospital is going up, and we want to make it affordable housing. And Ohio has a couple of incentive programs. It's a historic building. They have the historic tax credit program at the state level, but they also have an affordable housing incentive program. Trying to get them to work is next to impossible. So we're working with the administration and the bureaucracy to try to figure out how to get those programs to line up to make that project work. And at the same time, the legislature keeps tweaking with the law and everything else. But our team is integrated from the people who know the law and how it works with our people who have the relationships with the state, and then our project people to say, hey, here's what it's going to do for the community once it's done. Building that team to interact with those different agencies and the different people there is paramount to our success. There's no question.
Well, and there's got to be an educational part that you have to educate whoever the team you're joining, the community you're joining, the legislators you're joining, as to, what's going to be the inherent social good coming out of that. And that's got to be any good stories about conversations to convince someone that, hey, you got a gem here.
Yeah. Developers, real estate people generally don't have the best working relationship with communities. They tend to like to tear down historic buildings. They tend to like to do things a little quicker than the community wants or a little different than the community wants. We're different. I mean, we want to come in and save these historic buildings. So that the first project we do, the first interaction we have with them, we have to build that trust and get through all that skepticism of, do they really mean what they're saying here? Because not a lot of people do.
Are they genuine? Yeah,
exactly.
Right.
But once that first project is done, it gets far easier. And most of the organizations we dealt with, they're always open to that. And that's what I like. There are a few that aren't, but for the most part, it's there. And what's really nice is that's infectious, right? If we do we started in Cleveland. We did some great projects in Cleveland. When we went down to Columbus, the folks in Cleveland that we dealt with were very open to talking to the folks in Columbus. And then we moved from Columbus to Georgia and did some projects there. And then, they become almost champions, extensions of our team. That's what I mean by teams of teams.
Yeah.
That help us accomplish what we want, because we're helping them get their goals accomplished as well.
Hey teammates, I want to tell you about a project we're working on with Youngstown State University. One of the ways Ellen and I have decided to give back is through the Trestle Institute for Leadership and Teamwork. We've collected a set of successful business and nonprofit leaders to serve as guest servant leaders in partnership with the Sokolov Honors College to teach university students teamwork, leadership, and personal skills. We teach from a foundation built on gratitude, excellence, hope, love, and selflessness. If you're a young person or parent helping to search for a unique college experience, you can learn more at tresselinstitute.ysu.edu or ysu.edu. Links will be provided in the show notes.
Isn't that a great opportunity for I think about some of the challenges we have over the states that might have blank canvases. You know, people like to go paint on the blank canvas, you know, get a little infrastructure in there, and I can, I don't have to do some of the other hard work.
Sure.
But isn't one of our advantages here in the Midwest? I think we're in the Mideast, by the way. I don't think we're Midwest. Nebraska and Iowa are Midwest in my mind. But anyway, so us in the Mideast and the East, isn't there tremendous opportunity with some extraordinary buildings that have been built in our history?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's some, and it really, I know you want to say Mideast, but it's throughout the country. Obviously, on the eastern half of the country, it's the older part of the country, right? So we have more historic buildings, but there are some amazing properties, as you get further west as well, and we've done some of those. What's interesting is the historic preservation community is so much better educated, generally, again, in the East and the Mideast, as you put it, than it is out west. And I think in part because we have so many more old historic buildings that are important to our communities.
So as you've been building this team and expanding it geographically, I always felt as I went from being a small college guy, and then I was coaching at the mid-level, and then I was an assistant coach at the bigger level, and then I was back down to the mid-level. They're all a little bit different, and the experiences are different. Mm-hmm. I don't know that the fundamentals of building a team are different, but still, the world's different. I found it was critical to have mentors to help me learn the new world I was in. Mm-hmm. Any mentors that you can speak to?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest mentor is my brother-in-law, a gentleman named Pat Morris. He has guided. He's the one who said, "Hey, if you're he's a lawyer, did not get his MBA, and he said he would literally take me out to the woodshed if I didn't get my MBA." Huh. So it started there.
Wow.
And he's been a big mentor of mine. My father-in-law, who is as different from me as the day is long, has been a big influence on me. But I think I know the biggest influence is my father, who just passed in December, in late last year. He's a guy who did everything for everybody else and did very little for himself. Yeah. And just watching that was and continues to be every day the big influence on how I go about doing things.
Well, that generation was good at that.
Yes, very much.
There's no question about that. Yeah. So you talked about the MBA importance. Mm-hmm. And, we talk to our people all the time. You never stop learning, and you never stop broadening, what you can bring to the table. And speak to how getting that, yours happened to be an MBA after your law degree. Speak to what difference that made in helping you become a better team builder.
Oh, that's interesting. I think having both lawyers and finance people think very, very differently. And again, I think being able to understand both of them is another, I don't know how I would put it, but it gives me another data point on how to interact with people.
Another bridge.
And when I look back at my life, I have all these experiences that have allowed me to interact with people who are very different than I am, which is a big part of how I build teams and help facilitate the building of teams. And finance people and law people think completely differently. And for a long time, and even today, trying to bridge that gap of just how they think, not knowledge, just how they think, is incredibly useful in getting teams.
But you need both those.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? I mean, when I became a college president, I had never done anything like that. I had only had 100 guys and 12 coaches, and that was pretty simple, honestly. It wasn't easy, but it was simple. And all of a sudden you get to a whole university and a lot of things that were a part of what you had to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so blessed to have a great CFO because I didn't know that world, but I also knew that if you didn't do that well, and
Nothing else mattered.
nothing else mattered. And what I loved about him, his name was Neil McNally. He's the VP at Youngstown State to this day, and I used to always tease him that every time I asked him a question, he started with "No, we can't do that." Right?
That's pretty standard,
right?
It's pretty standard.
But then, you had to prove why maybe, we could consider it.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then, of course, you had to get with the legal side of things.
And they started at no.
But what I loved about, and Holly Jacobs was our legal counsel, and she was like, starts with no, we're going to do this right, but now here's what we can consider that would be appropriate, and so it's no different with building teams, though. We had guys that thought totally different. They had, the special teams guy wanted to punt every time,
Right.
I mean, because that's, no, let's go for the field goal. Well, no, maybe we should, the offensive guy, so you needed all that. And so as you continued, one thing I felt was as I was trying to keep learning and keep broadening, your knowledge base or whatever, I always felt you needed to read.
Oh, no question.
Because you don't have time. Mentoring takes time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's an ongoing evolutionary. You keep learning, and you take to your mentor, hey, look, we're going through this right now, and but reading, you can go and find some nuggets, and I think podcast kind of the same way. It's kind of become a new kind of book, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
Mention who you think have been good authors or good books that helped you along the way.
I don't have an book is easier than
okay,
authors.
book.
But authors, I read so many different authors. I'm not a single author person because I like to take little tidbits out of each one. But I will tell you, along the lines, there's a book called The Checklist Manifesto. And it's a really interesting book. And again, it fits into how you can learn from people and organizations that are completely different than you are. And he talks through the book. It's a very quick read, but he talks through the book and brings examples from different industries and how their processes and procedures work and how other industries adopted those processes and procedures and the incredible impacts it had on those industries. And it's like taking, how a pilot goes through his checklist before he even thinks about flying the plane and how that gets adopted into a hospital, for a surgery. And he goes through multiple examples like that. And just to see how things you thought had no impact on one another could be understanding that can have a great value to what you're working on and where you're going through. And I think that's getting harder today because all these algorithms and technology are pushing people to be so singular focused on one thing. We lose that ability to borrow experience and expertise from areas outside our own disciplines.
Well, it's interesting you say that because when I went from being a football coach to a president, as a coach, we had to keep things in context of how they affected the other. The decisions you make affect that side of the ball or that moment in the game, or you had to be thinking about its impact out. How's that? And then I got into a big place like a university, and you're talking to the people in various the College of Engineering or the College of Business or whatever, and I marveled at, I don't want to say inability, but the non-normalcy of thinking about, well, I know you need 2 more faculty members, and I know that would be great. But let's look at the whole. Right now, we never had mental health counselors. But you know what? Right now, it seems like there's a little bit more of a need. So maybe we should, so let's think about the whole context, and that's it's hard for bigger operations.
Oh, no question. No question. And that has been one thing that is changed for me over time. You know, when it was just 4 or 5 of us around a water cooler, or even like 15 or 16 around the course, you knew what everybody was doing.
Right.
You knew what everybody said. You spent so much time with them.
And you knew how
to
you affected
communicate.
each other.
Absolutely.
Yep.
And as the organization grew, that got harder and harder to do. And, you know, this might be a little bit of a longer story, but to me, it was super impactful. But when I started to realize I was having trouble managing the growth, and it was really managing a different type of team, because before the team was, I know all these people, I spend all my time with them, to I'm not going to be spending as much time with these folks, but they're part of the team. I started to have some issues on how my communications were getting received, what my expectations were of them, and them of me. So I hired a coach to come in and follow me around for a few months. And I was still having the difficulty, and she just asked me a simple question, which appeared simple, which was, where in your life do you communicate very well? And I mentioned earlier that I coached youth football. And I said, I coach youth football. All the parents tell me I'm really good at it because I can get their 7, 8, and 9-year-olds or 10, 11-year-olds to do anything. It was one of the parents actually said to me, I think if you asked little Joey to run out in traffic, he would, right? And I'm like, well, I'm not going to do that. She goes, well, that's why he would, because he knew you wouldn't do anything to put him in danger. And so my coach said, okay, so that happens there. What do you do with them that's different than what are you doing at the office? And I'm like, well, I said, I got this philosophy with kids, in that there's about 7 different types of ways kids act, and they're unique to each child. They fit into one of those 7 buckets. Some of them you got to yell at. Some of them you got to joke around with. Some of them you got to get down on a knee and talk up to. Some of them you got to stand over them and just talk straight. And all the different, and then some of them you really can't coach them, but you can coach them through other kids. And there's a different way for all of them. And once you figure that out, you're much more effective at leading them. And she just looks at me and goes, why don't you do that with all your people?
Right.
And I'm like, well, and my first reaction was, they're adults. We shouldn't have to do this. And she said, no, you absolutely have to do that. And that shift in my thinking, that the responsibility for communication is mine, not the person receiving the communication, has been a game changer for me in building of teams.
And having them understand what you were communicating to them. You can't just assume that they get it, because, how is it, but the amount of time you can spend figuring out the 7 different things for your kids, all of a sudden your company gets bigger.
Yeah.
And you may not know them quite as intimately as all of a sudden you're hiring some people that you couldn't have worked with everyone because your company got bigger to that point.
Yep.
And so how do you have the time to get to know them? That's what I found hard.
Yeah.
The bigger entity.
It is hard. And one thing that, we've progressed to is, general high level. I'm not a big believer in the detailed versions of personality studies.
Yeah.
So everybody, once you're hired in, we have them take a test, which I don't know, takes 15, 20 minutes to go through. But it's called the DISC profile. And it is amazing on how knowing just where a person is on this DISC profile, how they need to be interacted with for you to communicate with them the best way. And that has been a big factor. Every person in our company, that's either on their desk, so people when they walk in know, or it's up on the wall behind them. And it is a big help. And oftentimes when we have conflicts, once you ask the question, well, did you take into account their DISC profile? They go, no. And it's like, okay, why don't you try that? And that tends to resolve a lot of those issues.
It's interesting. We gave a behavior analysis to our players at Ohio State. It cost a little bit, but we had a little bit more money at Ohio State. I only could afford at Youngstown State to give it to my coaches and my quarterbacks because I could only afford like 12 of them, right? Whatever. And what I found about those was they weren't helpful at the beginning. They were helpful after I got to know them. It was like, yep, so you spend a year with them, and then you go back and read their behavior analysis, and you say, yep. But if I read it at the beginning, the recruit coming in, we gave him the test and all that, I didn't get it. But once I had that chance to spend time and
No, I agree with you 100%. That's why we don't give it to recruits.
Yeah.
We only give it to people we've already hired.
Right.
Because that is incredibly important. It's not a document, and that's why we put it on everybody's desk, because as you get to know people or interact with people more, that insight becomes more valuable.
Right.
And it's
Right.
not, and like you said, it's not as valuable day one.
I can think of two of my quarterbacks, and one of them on the continuum that this behavior analysis taught us, that he just didn't have a natural, innate need for information. He just liked to play. That's what he was most comfortable with, and it served him well. He was playing at Ohio State, so he obviously did well. And then as we were trying to get him to reach his potential, and we went back and studied him a little bit, we said, we got to give some opportunities for him to maybe gain information he wouldn't naturally want to seek.
Mm-hmm.
And then once he got that information and he saw how it affected his performance, whoa, I don't have an innate need for information, but I see how that information is helping me, so I'm going to, do that. And another quarterback that he was on the far end of the spectrum of being a perfectionist.
Yeah.
Well, it's not a good deal at quarterback because every play is not going to go right. When you're in high school, you might score a touchdown every time and win the state championship. But at Ohio State, you're. And
the playbook, the safety
Yeah.
went there, and,
Right.
and I threw the ball. He was over there.
Right. Yeah. And then once we gave him some exercises, in fact, we asked him to start playing golf. We said, because you're a great athlete. It's one thing you haven't played. You can play that the rest of your life, but you're also going to find, like, by the time you walk up to that ball in the woods, you're going to have calmed down and figured out what's the plan for the next moment.
As we just saw in the U.S. Open last week.
Oh, right,
Yeah.
right. They got a little bit of rain,
Yep.
In that one. But so as the company grew,
Mm-hmm.
what was the biggest change in the dynamic of what did you think you needed to change to get that bigger group?
We're still going through it now. Actually, when you're smaller, you don't really need or pay attention to managers, and I think you don't have an appreciation for them, and you have this thinking in your head that the manager's just a layer of bureaucracy you don't need. But what we realized a couple of years ago, and we're spending a lot of time now on coaching people to be managers, is you need that in organizations once you get to a certain size, because they have to take what's going on up here and manage the folks here to be able to get them to work in sync. They're, call them facilitators for lack of a better word. And we're still going through that process of getting that managerial level, the skill sets they need to do that well.
I've had that debate with companies, leaders and so forth, that felt like, well, as we started getting bigger, the people we had when we were smaller really weren't wired at the bigger range, so we thought we needed to make changes. That was never, something that I could relate to because, I felt like, I was at bigger, and you had to learn what's the nuance of the different thing. Which side of that equation, or a little bit of both?
It's definitely a little bit of both, but we've always been of the mindset that it's our responsibility as an organization to give the tools to our people to change.
Mm-hmm.
Because working in a larger organization is definitely different than a smaller organization.
Or to evolve.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's our responsibility to give them the ability to learn, whether it's through education or tools or coaching or what name it. And then at the end of the day, if they don't want that new role or that new challenge, then we'll find a place for them where they are happy.
Where their best fit is.
Absolutely. So I think it's a little of both.
I thought one thing we didn't do as well, as I think back to my 8.7 years as the president of YSU, was I don't know if we invested enough time in training and helping our people grow. Because you're so, we got to get the enrollment, or we got to go raise money, or we've got to go do this, we got to get the research dollars, And I think back to the amount of time from a proportional standpoint when I was coaching that we worked on training the people who were leading versus when we were bigger. If I had it to do over again, I probably wouldn't have been feeling the urgency to do. I would have probably worked a little bit harder on growing my leaders.
No, look, we're in a time where instant gratification is so important.
Yeah. And spreadsheets and quarterly and all that. Yeah.
And, the result in this context of that is you don't get an immediate payback to training and coaching.
Right.
It takes a while. It's an investment.
Yeah.
And so you have this natural, societal instant gratification drumbeat that's at you, which makes it hard to do that.
Yeah.
But you have to. And
one of the fun things we did at Ohio State, which I really think helped my leaders grow, was, we would have 11 or 12 regular season games, and I thought to myself, after being there a couple, 3 years, the head coach goes up there every Tuesday talking about this week's game and, making them sound like they're the New York Giants or, whatever. And does your voice get, just, go over their head or whatever?
Get monotone.
Yeah, right. And so we started something, maybe our third or fourth year there, where we assigned an assistant coach to be the head coach for that week. And so he's the guy that started the week off with, hey, here's the challenge, here's the game plan, here's what how we're gonna spend we were only allotted so many hours we were allowed to practice and have meetings. Here's how we're gonna design it this week, here's why, all that kind of thing. And I really saw my coaches grow, and my players had a different voice. And I said, Coach Hazel's the head coach this week. And we used to have fun with it. I used to always tell him, hey, if you're the head coach Penn State, if we don't beat Penn State, you're not the head coach against Penn State anymore. We used to have, right. Fun with that. I used to always tell them, hey, the first 11 games, a couple of you might end up with 2 teams. You're the head coach, but I'm never going to relinquish the Michigan game. I'm the head coach for the Michigan game. So we just have to, know that going in. But I think it was a fun change in and helping them grow, a little bit. And so, how many years with your company? 25, did you say?
25. It'll be 25 in January.
Okay, so here's the question I used to get when I was 25 years into being a coach. Hey, Coach, have the kids changed since you started coaching? And so I'll pose it this way. Have the employees changed since you started? And now, granted, we got 18-year-old, we got the same age people new each year.
Right.
So,
right.
But have the employees changed?
I don't think their core has changed. We have a kind of one of our cultural norms is in how we quickly describe the people that work at GBX is smart, driven, good. And the word good has 2 meanings, right? It's good at what they do, but they're just good people.
Yep.
And I find if you find just people who are really good people, no matter what their skill sets are or their personality traits are or all the different cultural differences in people, if they're all good, they're going to get along. And I don't think that's changed in my 25 years. What's changed is what people do, how they interact with their friends and their families, and what their hobbies are. But to me, that's all peripheral issues. The core, good people are still good people.
Of those 3, as I've been going around the state visiting business industry, we've got 150 workforce initiatives in the state, and all the good groups trying to help raise up, whether they're educational institutions or technical or whatever. Of those three, the one I hear a little bit from business and industry, smart, yep. Good, yep, if we select good people. Little concerned about the driven part. That's what I'm getting a little bit. And I thought every time I hear that innuendo, I think back to the years and years and years that I had kids, and the world changed in my 48 years in higher education. It changed a bunch. But the one thing I didn't think changed was the kids from a standpoint of they wanted clear expectations, whether they acted like it or not. They really did. They wanted to be evaluated. They really wanted to know how they were doing. It was important to them. They wanted feedback. And they didn't want it sugar-coated because I think we were fortunate. We had goal-driven kids, and we spent a lot of time on asking them, hey, what are your goals? I'm here to help you reach your goals on the field, in the classroom, spiritually, in the community, health-wise. I need to know your goals so we can design opportunities for you to grow in the goals. And so I thought that they wanted to find out from you how they could reach their goals, but in fairness, maybe compared to a business who's got hundreds of employees and so forth, I could spend a lot of one-on-one time and get to their core. And so I didn't feel, and even with my employees at Youngstown State, if I had the opportunity to spend the time with them, I always felt that they weren't any different than people that grew up in the dark ages when I did, But I get that a lot on the driven side.
And no, I agree with that on the driven side, and it always came up in the context of millennials, right? And when I'm part of a group called Vistage that has local CEOs, and we meet once a month and get together, and there's always this conversation about I can't get them in it. Millennials to work. So in that context, that's where driven comes up. And we at GBX, we've never had any issue with our millennials being driven. And I was interested in to find out, why. And I came across, a speaker, author, a gentleman, I don't know if you've heard him, Simon Sinek.
Oh, yeah, sure.
And he's like, know your why. And what I'm finding is the people who are successful at GBX are our mission, what we do, what we give people the ability to seek out and progress, that teases their why. That gets to their why. And the people who aren't successful at GBX or should be doing something else, it doesn't tickle their why, if you will. Something else is their why. And we help them try to find that because I think that's what leads to whether you're driven or not. People have to earn a living, people have to be treated with respect, but what's really drives them is that why that Simon talks about.
It was really important for us to reach our potential. Our people had to realize it was bigger than them.
Yes, very much so.
And that, yes, they wanted to get a championship ring and they wanted to go to the NFL or they wanted to get notoriety or, whatever. But as soon as they started realizing that, the joy that you bring that school, the joy that you bring that student body, the joy that you bring that community, the joy that you bring the Buckeye Nation or the Penguin Nation, that's got to be part of what drives you. And that's what, to me, is kind of fun about your company is that you're not just building buildings. No. There's something bigger than you. We used to always say, with tradition comes responsibility. Well, you're working with tradition
very much,
every day, and finding the people who that is important to them was the key.
I 100% agree with that. There's no question, and when we see who really cares, that's what it is. They believe in our mission. And we believe in our mission. It's one thing to say it; it's another to do it. And that's what gets it all to work.
Well, and to me, that's the value of being on a good team. I tell people all the time when we're talking about the challenges higher education has and so forth, I said, I could solve that in a minute. If you made every person in that school be a part of some team, it might be the ensemble, might be the Baja Engineering race team, it might be the volleyball team, but if you'll just give them that something bigger than them thing, I think you would change people's experience and maybe the conversation about higher education.
Oh, look, I agree with you, but I also, emphasize in our organization that it's also important to recognize the individuals and give the individuals opportunities. So, one of the things I do is I take a back seat to as much as I possibly can. So when we receive awards, which we receive a lot of, I never go accept them. I'm sending some of our younger folks, some of our minnow managers to feel it, to be part of it, to represent the organization.
Yeah.
And it's everything, whether it's a little thing or it's a big thing. Allowing somebody else to wear that blue ribbon for the day or the week, like you had mentioned with your coach of the head coach of the week, recognizing that individual is as important, and I think helps drive the way people think about the we as opposed to the me.
One of the things we used to talk to our staff a lot about was it's not that hard to be fair. We can measure, how people are doing, and if we have a conscience at all, we can compensate fairly and so forth. But the hardest thing is to appear to be fair.
Yes.
Because everyone's vantage point is different, and you have to know that.
Yep.
And you have to be thinking about, and that's where Governor DeWine is so good. He's amazing how, I had 100 guys and 12 coaches. Then I have, 12,000 students and 1,500 employees. Now I'm with Governor DeWine, who's got 12 million people.
Yeah.
And 28 agencies who have, 4,000 employees. And it's amazing how when he's sitting in a meeting of all 28 agencies, whatever it is, how when we're talking about the importance of their agency and the importance of the people they serve, it's real. I mean, and you can tell by how much time and effort he's put into learning about who they're serving and what they're doing, and he does a great job of appearing to be fair. Not only is he fair, but he appears to be fair, and it's and that's hard.
Yeah. It's interesting you mentioned that because I had a situation, I don't know, about 2 years ago. A lady that I've known for many, many years working for us. She just casually made the statement to me, "So who's your favorite right now at GBX?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?"
Right.
And she named off, my last quote favorite, right? And I was like, "What makes you think they're my favorite?" "Well, you're always with them." And I was like, "Look, business is business, and I happen to be doing a lot of work with this person right now, and at some point that'll be done because they won't need me as part of it anymore, and it'll become somebody else. Not there for my favorite; they just happen to be there." So now I make a point throughout the organization of letting the organization know who I'm spending time with right now and why, and that addresses your point there perfectly. Is the appearance is oftentimes more important than the reality,
Right.
And I get it wrong a fair bit.
Well, I get that question all the time on radio shows and this now. Well, who was your best player?
Right.
Are you kidding me? There is no way you're gonna drag me into that. Well, no. Who was your best athlete? No. Oh, which was your best team? No. Which game was the best win? No. Because the appearance and I don't have a best favorite player. I love them all.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have a favorite team. I love them all. Some of them gave me gray hair and individually and team-wise, but that didn't mean I didn't love them,
Right.
But people want you to not appear to be fair.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have to work at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to give you one last one because it's probably most critical.
Okay.
And we can't have a good conversation about how do you build a team. Your wife's name is
Debbie.
Debbie. Lessons, because I know I've gotten a lot of lessons from Ellen. Like when I come home, and because she's not in the middle of the fray.
Yep.
Right. Mm-hmm. We just had 97 of our former players at the governor's house, and we had a little town hall. I said to the governor, these kids are 35 to 45. They're doing businesses. They have kids in school. They're living what we're trying to provide.
Right.
I'd love for you to hear from them. And it was fabulous. And it was so much fun watching Ellen, talking with all those old guys who are now young men and have families, and just her ability to see and feel things that, I guess us guys sometimes can't. But best lesson that your bride taught you?
Oh, there are so many of them. I'll tell you one thing that's interesting about Deb is that she has been on this road for the 25 years with me. Mm-hmm. All the people at GBX know her and know her well. She's at all the events. Mm-hmm. She interacts with all of them, and it is clear they all like her far better than they like me. And I will tell you, the bit of advice is, it's not really advice, is I will have people in our organization who aren't necessarily comfortable talking to me about something I'm doing. Mm-hmm. They'll call her. And she'll come talk to me about it.
That's a good thing.
And that is an invaluable channel
right
within our organization. And she's a contrarian, like I am. And when I got a problem, she'll be basically taking the side of the other side of the issue, which is invaluable as well. But one piece of advice, I think she was the one who mentioned for me to get my coach. And I poo-pooed that very quickly, and she was just hounding me on it. And I did it, and it's probably one of the best decisions I've ever made. If you can call it a decision, because she basically said you have to do it. Right.
But your spouse can see things that you can't.
Yes.
And so many times Ellen has said to me, "Hey, look, you can't be all things to all people. It's not good for your."
Yeah, that's a hard one for me.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
But that's you don't have enough time to do that. And you've got to delegate a little bit more. And type A. I want everything just right. And so forth. And it's so valuable to have every part of your team.
There's no question. And now my kids are in the business, so they're seeing a lot of that stuff too, and communicating back. I think having those channels of communication are so invaluable to building teams.
So one last question.
Yeah.
Give us one moment that your team really, you could just tell they were proud of what theirs and all of your efforts accomplished. A moment.
I think the one that's going to happen here any day is we have one project that we're moving forward with. We bought a block in New Orleans a number of years ago that is the birthplace of jazz. And the last hurricane that came through New Orleans knocked down one of those buildings. And we spent a lot of money preserving all the bricks of that building.
After it was knocked down?
After it was knocked down, and cleaning them, and then designing a building in conjunction with all our team members that were in the historic preservation organizations in New Orleans and everywhere else. And we got that building rebuilt, and it is just about complete. And all the bricks from the old that we had are all part and parcel of that building now. And it's a moment we're getting ready to celebrate, and that will probably really be considered one of the best moments we've had. And we'll share that moment with the city, the preservation organization, all those other teams that are extensions of our team.
There's no question. The moment that joy goes way beyond your personal joy, your personal accomplishment.
Yep.
That moment, I think about when we won the national championship in 2002. there hadn't been one in 34 years, and I would get letters from people saying I thought I was going to die before we ever won another, and all. And, I had a guy in Youngstown one time tell me after we won a championship, this is the greatest day in my life since BE Day.
Wow.
And I'm like,
that's some high praise.
I'm like, wow, if we could, that win was just worth that.
Yep.
And the joy that it goes way beyond you. And this has been a ball. I appreciate it.
I've had fun.
Thanks so much. And I was nervous going in because I don't know the first thing about business, period. And so this was a lot of fun, and I appreciate it.
A lot of commonalities of business and life.
Yes, sir. Thanks so much, my friend.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
All righty.
Take care.
Till the next time, it's all about the team.